Welcome to another episode of Your Life Unchained podcast. I am Rick Sheninger, your host, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guest today, Shar Weil. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Rick. I'm really excited to be here.
Super excited to have you here. She's here with us all the way from England. Super cool, across the pond. So Shar, you have an interesting story to tell, as I understand it.
Yes, very interested. Wow.
You've overcome some challenges. You've overcome some limiting beliefs of your own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's been a busy life. At my tender age of 41, I feel like I've lived maybe like a few lifetimes already, just like condensed in that 41 years. But as you alluded to, I am living in the UK. I live in Merseyside, like not far from Liverpool. But I'm originally from Newport Beach, California, and I moved here when I was 14. My mom's from England originally, so she moved us here when we were, teenagers, me and my little sister. And I never have left. I've stayed. But there's a lot of reasons for that. As I said, I grew up in Newport Beach, California, which is like hands down. I know I'm biased, okay, but it is like hands down one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And it's just so chilled, so laid back, such a lovely vibe about it. And I still have lots of friends and family back there. But I also have lots of family in the UK because my mom's from here. And she moved us here when I was 14. But by the time I was 17, I had a seizure, which I'd never had before. And it turned out to be a brain tumor. So at 18, I was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. And they told me that I would be dead by the time I was 30. They didn't really know what type of tumor it was, but because of where it was located in my brain, it was too dangerous to biopsy, to even test to see what it was and what they were dealing with. So they said they were going to have to just leave it to grow as big as it could without killing me before they actually went in and did any investigatory like surgery. So that kind of started a long journey of chronic illness and, the seizures getting worse, having to navigate being on anticonvulsant medications and everything that goes along with that, also whilst being very young. I was only 17, 18 when I was kind of diagnosed. And I think at that age, you're still a little, I don't know that you have like a huge sense of your own mortality at that age.
True.
I feel like there's a whole part of your brain that like shuts down because it's trying to let the rest of your brain grow and develop, and I don't think you fully understand. I didn't fully understand. I remember sitting in the doctor's office and the neurologist's office when he gave me the diagnosis, and he basically told me I had like 10 years to live. And my mom was sat next to me and she was obviously like devastated, and I didn't even cry. Like, I actually remember looking at him and saying like, that sucks. I mean, that's kind of put a little dampener on my plans for the rest of my life, but we'll see what happens. And I kind of just went on and continued to live my life as normally as I could. I think because I didn't feel sick every single day, I kind of just put it to the back of my mind. And weirdly, I don't believe I ever truly believed I was going to die. I never truly believed I was that sick. I don't know why. That was just like a feeling that I had inside me. And obviously I was on a lot of medication, so it did impact on me. It made me more lethargic. It meant I couldn't do as much. It did slow me down a little bit, but I still went to work every day and I still got on about my life. The only things I did find that there were things I couldn't do, like I couldn't go out and stay up all night with my friends. I couldn't go out drinking and doing stuff like that, because the second I stayed up too late and didn't get enough sleep, I would have a seizure. or if I went out drinking, it was guaranteed within the next day or two, I would have a seizure. And so I just made like life choices to make my life as simple and easy as possible around like looking after my own health within my own limitations of what my own body could handle at that time. However, a spanner again was kind of thrown into the works because at 17, I met a guy. He was a little bit older than me, and we ended up in a relationship. And so he was sort of with me throughout my diagnosis and when I was like starting to take the medication. And then when I turned 20, I found out I was pregnant. And that was obviously really frowned upon with my diagnosis because I was on a lot of anticonvulsant medications, which is dangerous really when you're pregnant. Having seizures is dangerous when you're pregnant. Women are like 30% more likely to have seizures even if they've never had one when they're pregnant. So there's a lot of stuff. There was a lot of stuff going on there, and actually the doctors begged me to terminate the pregnancy. They didn't want me to go through with it because they were concerned that neither of us would survive the pregnancy. But I chose to go ahead with it. I felt very like responsible. I felt like it was my responsibility that I got pregnant, or our responsibility that I got pregnant. And I didn't really feel like it was, at that time, I didn't feel like it was the right decision to terminate. So I went through with it. I nearly died when I was 4 months pregnant. I went into something called status epilepticus, which means I had one long seizure that just didn't stop. And it went on for about 2 days. And anyone that knows anything about epilepsy, 5 to 10 minute seizure is enough to kill you. It's enough to make you brain dead. And this had gone on for about 2 days. So when I actually woke up in the hospital, the doctor was sitting on my bed, like staring at me. And he was like, I'm so happy to see you alive, like awake. He was like, you had about 10 minutes before we were going to have to declare you brain dead. And we were going to have to turn everything off. So, it was a traumatic experience, to say the least, as well as being pregnant all at the same time.
Right.
But luckily my daughter was born. She was born premature. There was a lot of stuff that went on around there. She was in the intensive care unit for about 3 weeks after she was born. And she's had her own struggles and difficulties over the years from that, because whether you like it or not, there is going to be some residual effects of that kind of a trauma when you're in a pregnancy. So, but you know what, bless her, she's 20, she's at university, she's studying film studies, she's, getting a 2-1, which in the UK, I know it's a slightly different schooling system, but it basically means she's bossing it. She's getting like what in effect would be like a 3.5 grade point average. So she's doing really, really well. I'm so like proud of her. She's so driven, so willful, like so strong. She's just incredible. She's my absolute inspiration. So yeah, that's kind of like one little part of the story, of my story. And coming through all of that, during all of that time when I had the brain tumor, there was a lot of other stuff going on. Not only was there the pregnancy, but the relationship that I was in was extremely volatile, was extremely hostile. It was not a safe relationship to be in. So trigger warning for anybody. However, again, I got through that. I made some choices for myself. I left the relationship I had just turned 23, and my daughter was 2, nearly 3. And I decided to leave that relationship. And I had my very first brain surgery a couple of weeks later, because I was getting so sick that they decided it was time to try and biopsy it and see if there was any treatments that they could give me to slow the growth of the brain tumor down and give me a chance to live longer. So I had that first surgery. The biopsy came back inconclusive, so they had to reschedule another one, but it got pushed back by about a year. So in August 2005, I went for my second brain surgery. And by that point, I was having seizures every single day. and I was really, really ill. And it was the first time in the whole time of my illness that I thought, I'm going to die. But I actually think this could be it. I'm not convinced I'm going to be all right anymore. Like it was the first time that my mortality really, I was face to face with it. And I thought this could actually be it. So I went for that second surgery. And when I woke up, I had 20 staples up the side of my head. And the first surgery, they did keyhole. I didn't even have a stitch. They glued the skin back together. The second one, I woke up and I had they'd shaved the side of my head. I had 20 staples in the side of my head. And the surgeon came in to see me and he was like, guess what? I think I got it. I think I got it all out. And I was like, what? And he went, well, I just got in there and I thought, I'm not running the risk of doing this surgery and not getting a good reading on this biopsy. And I kind of just had to look at it and thought, I can get that. I can get it. I'm going to do it. And he just went in and whipped it out. And that was that, and I had to be monitored for another 10 years after that. I had scans done for 10 years, every 6 months for 10 years after that. And you know what? There isn't even any scar tissue. Not only is there no residual abnormal cells, there was no more tumor, it's gone. There wasn't even any scar tissue. And I've had 2 brain surgeries. There was nothing. They couldn't believe it.
Wow.
When they actually looked at the results, when they'd sent the biopsy, they called me in and they said, look, we have good news. We've done it. We've removed all of it. If there's any abnormal cells, we'll find that out over the next few years when we're scanning you, but we think we've got everything. He said, second of all, it was a meningioma, which is basically a tumor that grows from the meninges on the outside layer of the brain inwards. And they thought the whole time that it was a tumor growing from the inside outwards, which made it impossible to actually operate on. He's like, if we'd have known it was a meningioma, we could have operated on it in 1997 when we found it. And he was like, please don't sue me. And I was like, why would I sue? I'm like, you literally just told me that I'm going to live the rest of my life tumor-free, happy. I'm just nothing but grateful. I just want to thank you. I gave him the biggest hug. He was so scared I was going to sue him for not taking it out sooner. And I just don't look at life that way. I don't look at life at what could have been. I look at life what's happening right now and what do I need to accept and what can I let go of and how can I be grateful and then how can I be excited about moving forward, and that's how I think going through that experience has given me that mindset. I probably had it to a certain extent, but I think everything that I've been through has led me to truly believe that everything happens the way it's supposed to for my greatest, absolute, maximal soul growth, for me to learn as much as possible, to grow as much as possible and become the best version of myself, no matter what I face. It's for my greatest good. And that's just how I have to look at life. That's what gets me through. Now, if I had stayed in America, living in California, and I'd have been diagnosed with that brain tumor, I'd have been dead before I was 19, never mind having surgery at 23 and 25, because I would never have been able to afford this treatment. So as much as I hated my mother for moving me from sunny Southern California to, bearing in mind, when she moved me to England, she moved us to this little teeny tiny mill town in the northwest of England that it was like moving to the Blue Mountains or something. There was nothing. There was literally nothing there. Shops were only open 3 days a week. Everything closed at 4:30. I'd never seen anything like it. I felt like I'd been traveled back in time. There's horse and carts coming down the street. It was crazy. But I was so angry about her moving us there. And it was such a culture shock. But actually now looking back, if she hadn't moved us when she did, I wouldn't be here today. That is fact. It's only because we have the NHS in England that I was able to get the treatment that I required and I survived what I did. So again, I have to be grateful.
Wow, that story just mind-blowing. So thinking back from sitting in the chair when you were, 17, 18, and getting that first kind of shock and awe, to sitting in the chair after he removed it with 20 staples in your head. As you reflect on those two situations, I mean, what do you feel from that? And what's your takeaway from not only being in those situations, but how you processed the things between those two situations?
That's a great question. So for me, being sort of just 18 and sitting in that chair the first time, being told that I had a brain tumor that was inoperable and the chances were it was going to kill me before I was 30, I could almost feel my body just flick. It was like a flick of a switch, like you just flick into survival mode. I felt almost like, when you're in a car and you're driving like a stick and you drop down a gear.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit like, right, I'm ready. Like drop down the gear. I'm ready. Let's go. And I had that kind of, right, this is what's happening. Let's just deal with it. And I think I'm sure there's all kinds of things going on there, from dissociation to denial to survival mode. The brain is an incredible machine. Let's have it right. Like it has been built to keep us safe. It's been built to, like, it is there to keep us alive, right? And it'll do whatever it can to keep you alive, even if that means hiding your own thoughts from the fact that you're going to die. Like, it's going to do whatever it has to do, right? So I think in that moment, from being sat in that chair to being like, oh, this sucks, right? So what do we do? What do we need to do next? Well, we armor up and we go to battle. We do whatever we need to do, and we get through it. It's fine. And for me, I went from a real internally, like I said, I never truly believed I was going to die. There are people that get that diagnosis and they give up in that moment. They don't drop down into the next gear. They don't click into, like, the fight or flight changes for them slightly. They don't have the fight. They freeze or they fawn, like they just stop or they give up. I didn't do that. I went the opposite direction. I was like, right, well, I don't believe I'm going to die. I'm just going to get on with my life and we'll see what happens. Like, don't at me. I'll figure it out. I'm not even going to worry about it. So I just got on with my life. Fast forward through we're talking what, 7 years, it was 8 years of me having seizures, 7 years from the diagnosis, from when I actually had it removed and had that second situation, that second moment sitting in the chair. I can tell you right now that 7 years of my life, more happened to me in that 7 years of my life than most people will go through in their entire lives. There's a lot of stuff I haven't even touched on because we don't have long enough for that podcast. That's like a Lord of the Rings trilogy that maybe one day I'll figure out if I'm going to write or make a movie about. But the fact that I truly believed that 7 years between those two moments was like, my body my brain, everything trying to distract me from the fact that I was dying. And I just filled it with a lot of other stuff to keep me busy. Whether that was my daughter or my partner or my work, my job, like whatever it was, I tried to fill my time. I just wanted to keep living. I wasn't willing to die. I wasn't willing to go out like that. It just wasn't it's not in my genetic makeup to lie down and give up. However, what I learned between that time and the next time was when I sat in that chair 7 years later, the little girl that was sat in the chair the first time was a little girl. I was just 18. By the time I sat in that chair the next time, I was 25, nearly 26. And I was a mother. and I had more to live for. And I felt nothing but gratitude and elation and excitement. Like the excitement, I can't even begin to tell you. I was so excited about what my life had in store for me. And I was a little like, God, what have I been doing for the last 7 or 8 years? Like, I haven't even like focused on, I worked the whole time, but what I didn't do was focus on my career.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right. So I worked because I needed purpose. And I'm like that. Like, I still need to be doing, I have to help people. I need a purpose in life. So I still worked. But I was like, what's the point going to university and getting a degree when I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 30 anyway? Like, I'm not going to waste my time at school. I'm just going to get on with my life, like living my life. So I remember sitting there and thinking, like, wow, I felt like it was more of a feeling. It was an opening up. My life had been this, it had been enclosed, and it had been enclosed in the chronic disease that I was dealing with and all that encompasses, and just surviving and fighting that fight. And the second they give you that, like, that diagnosis of freedom, I felt all of that burst wide open. And I was like, wow, I get to decide now. I get to decide who I become, what I do. I'm not going to I'm not going to be determined and like by my diagnosis. I now get to just run and be free. Like, I get to be who I want to be, get the career I want to get, live where I want to live, do what I want to do. Like, I felt this massive sense of freedom. Although it did take a good few years after that of weaning off all the medication. It wasn't like an overnight thing where everything was fixed, but
Right.
I was, by the time I was 30, I'd managed to wean myself off all of the medication, and that allowed me to get fitter and healthier. And that kind of kickstarted my my journey with learning how to heal myself through my own body, whether that's through movement, nutrition, your mental and emotional health, and looking at healing as a whole, complete person. And so that was kind of where my journey drove me.
So it was kind of like, initially when you were 18, you were handed essentially a book saying, here's your life, here's where it's going to end, here's the path, right? A pre-written book saying, here's, this is how things are going to, and there's an end to it. Versus when you were 25, you were sitting in that chair and they basically handed you a stack of empty papers saying, all right, write your story.
Exactly that. But it's interesting because you mentioned limiting beliefs, and I know that's very much about what this podcast is about. And I was given an empty book, like you said. It was like a book with empty pages. However, I don't actually believe that's what you get handed, because at 25, 26 years old, although I had this like feeling of freedom that I could go do anything, be anything. And I don't know if that's an American thing as well. Like, we kind of are brought up believing that, like, we can do whatever we want to do. We just have to put the work in, and like everybody's created equal, and like, it doesn't really matter. You can come from nothing. You can live in a shoebox and be president of the United States. Like, whatever. I don't know if it's like partially like a cultural thing or how I was brought up. I think I've always had a lot of self-belief and believed that I could do anything I put my mind to. However, I still do, although I was handed this book that had empty pages, it still had the stories that my parents wrote for me. It still had the stories that my family wrote for me long before I had that brain tumor. And that's what I struggled with the most, I would say, moving forward and out of everything. I had this huge lease of life and I ran with it. Like, I literally felt like I grew wings and I could fly. But I think that takes you so far until you fail again, and then you come up against other adversity but it's different adversity. And it's when that adversity taps into your limiting beliefs and it taps into that kind of wounding that you've got. That's when it gets sticky, and that's when the fun starts. Like, that's when you have to like really start digging deep and doing work you didn't even know existed. And that's what it was like for me anyway.
So what was the big, if there was a big kind of aha moment as you're kind of coming out of all that, 25, and then, you're kind of obviously going through the healing process and then weaning off the medications and trying to find your way, right? Because you're kind of still finding your way through the dark at that point. Mm-hmm. But what was the big realization or a turning point, or whatever the right terminology is, to finding your path, finding not only your passion, but your purpose?
So that was a long journey from there. And to be honest, I'm still on it, and I'm 41. So we're, it's another 15, 16 years down the line. And I'm still on that journey. And I can guarantee it, I'm going to be on that journey forever. Like, I think if you're not growing, learning, growing, you're dying anyway, right? Like, we're naturally just as human beings, as bodies, like we're constantly growing, regenerating, like improving. Like, that's just what our bodies do by nature. So like, if I'm not learning and I'm not growing, I may as well be dying anyway. So I'm in the journey for the long haul, but there's been a couple of key points along that way where I remember getting to 30, and I'd spent the last few years, although I'd been, coming off the medication, what happened was my energy levels started to pick up. And I had a limiting belief in my mind that I was just lazy. I thought that I was a lazy person because I'd spent the last 8 years lying on a sofa, because I couldn't do anything.
Right.
And I'd been told by people, like, you're just being lazy, like, because they don't know, they don't understand what's going on for you. And then somehow I had this limiting belief that I wasn't hardworking and that I was lazy and I didn't know how to get stuff done. And then I was like, all of a sudden I had all this energy, and I was like, wherever I was working, whatever I was doing, as I came off all this medication, I started taking over. Like, anything I was touching, like, I was like, I'm going to run this. I can do this better. My brain, like, my cognitive function improved. So not only were my like actual physical energy levels going up, but my cognitive function was improving and increasing. And I was like, anything I looked at, I was like, I can fix it. I know how to figure that out. No problem. Like, and I was like, where is this coming from? Like, maybe I can do, like, maybe I'm not lazy. Maybe I am intelligent. Maybe I can do all of these things. And the funny thing is when I look back at when I was a kid, I was like a straight A student. I was a dancer. I danced 30 hours a week. I used to ride my bike everywhere. I was on the swim team as a kid. So I was up at 5 a.m. I didn't get home till 9 at night. I was just constantly on the go doing stuff. And it's funny that just this one like spot in time in the middle where I was so sick, like, almost erases all, like, I've forgotten who I was before. And now I was like having to like reacquaint myself with myself as the medication, the fog started lifting. So I remember getting to about 30 and having all this energy, and I was training at the gym, and I was like eating well, and I was learning. I'm just a geek. I just love the science behind like physiology and nutrition. And like, so I was loving learning about all these different things. And I love neuroscience. I just love digging deep into learning about anything that I'm passionate about, I suppose. And I remember I'd gone back to California, and I'd spent the last 12 months like thinking, like, I've taken over where I work, but I want more. Like, I haven't been to university. Like, I didn't go to college. I didn't do a degree. And now I'm going to be 30. And what am I going to do with my life? I have like nothing to show for it. Like, how am I ever going to progress? How am I ever going to earn the money that I believe I'm worthy of earning? Like, what do I do? But I had this limiting belief that I couldn't do it, that I couldn't go to school and get a degree, that I wasn't capable, that I couldn't run my own company, or I couldn't run somebody else. I don't know. I just had all these limiting beliefs. So I did the worst thing you can do, and that's did nothing, right? Like, when you don't know what to do and you don't trust yourself and you don't believe in yourself, what do? We procrastinate. and we sit in paralysis and do nothing. And so I was having a conversation with a family friend and I was explaining everything to her, and she just looked at me and she went, Shar, it doesn't matter what you do, just do something. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't know what I want to do. And I don't know what I'm passionate about. And I don't know. And I don't know. And she went, it doesn't matter. Just do something, do anything. Because once you do something, you will figure out on that journey which bits of it you enjoy, which bits of it you don't, which bits of it light you up, which bits of it you're passionate about. And then you can drop all the other stuff and focus on that one bit that you actually really, really love, and you can grow from there. And then she's like, you know, it isn't a straight line. Progress is never linear.
Right.
It's never linear. So that was a real pivotal moment for me when she said that. And so I just went back to school and I studied and I got my degree in business and management studies. But what I realized after that, when I went into doing, like, I started running companies, I worked for a corporate setting up businesses, then I started doing business consulting, and I was doing all of that and I was burning out, and I was working 60, 70 hours a week, thinking that being successful in my career was what I was supposed to be doing in my 20s. And now I'm in my 30s. So I've got to get it done now, and like pushing. And I had another kind of one of those like light bulb, life-changing moments where I was sitting in Maui on holiday with my then partner and my family, like my sister and all of her family. And I was miserable. And I'd been there for like a week and I was still like a zombie and I couldn't enjoy anything. And I was like, you know, sat on a beach in the most beautiful place on the planet. And I was a misery guts, you know, like nobody wanted to be around me. And my partner just looked at me and was like, something has to give. Like, if you can't appreciate the beauty of where we're at right now, because you're so broken down and so burnt out from the job that you're doing, something has to change. And in that moment, again, I had that like real like epiphany light bulb moment that what I was doing was so out of alignment with my purpose that it was like just sucking the life out of me. And I felt more sick then than I did when I had the brain tumor. And that was when I really got connected with myself. And I realized that helping people with their physical, emotional, and mental health is what I am passionate about. All I want is for people to feel strong and empowered, connected with themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, because we are a whole person. We're not just like our physical, we're not just our mental. Like, we have to look at ourselves as this whole being, and we have to work on every aspect of ourselves. Otherwise, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle and you're going to end up really in a bad place and not really be able to put your finger on quite why, because you're going to think you've got most of it locked down and you won't. So that was when I made a big shift. And then I retrained and became a personal trainer and a yoga teacher, a nutrition coach, and I had a massive, massive shift. There's been lots of other things along the way that have helped me, you know, forge my path and get me on the pathway to actually living my purpose and helping people the way I want to. However, I would say, you know, one of the biggest drivers for that for me is my own self-healing. It's about looking at my own journey, all the places I've struggled, all of the adversity I faced, and how I got through it. I didn't just suck it and see. I did the work. I went away and I learned about why am I going through what I'm going through? Why am I feeling like I'm feeling? What's happening with my body? What's happening with my mind? What effects have these traumas had on me? What do I need to do if I want to be successful in business? Like, you can think that all that mental and emotional stuff has no impact on your business life. You're wrong. If you have a limiting belief in your business practice, it's because you have a limiting belief at your core belief system that probably started long before you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s. That stuff happened when you were a kid and you've been carrying it around with you for years and years and years. It just manifests itself at different times in different places. So that was the biggest lesson for me going into like my 30s and 40s as I've built businesses then for myself. I don't have limiting beliefs when I build a business for somebody else. I see their potential. I see their strength. I see their growth. I can visualize it. I can strategize it. I can plan it. I can implement it. I can like run that out for them. No problem. As soon as I start trying to build something for myself, I'm like, oh, I can't, I'm not worthy of this. I can't do this. Like, oh, you know, all that crap has to just be put to bed. And like, I love that you used the analogy of the blank book, because I literally had this conversation about 2 years ago with my own mother. And it went like, she said something to me. We've done a lot of work on our relationship. And I actually said to her, if you want to continue reading about me in that old book, I'm going to have to leave you here reading that book. You're not going to be included in the new one I'm writing. Right? I'm like, you wrote this book about me for me 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm done with that book because I didn't write it. You did. So if you want to continue trying to relate to me out of that book, the chapter's closed. Like, we've moved on to a new book now. So you either have to get involved with the new story that I'm writing, or you're going to have to live with the memory of the book you wrote for me, because that is just not for me anymore. You know, and I think people do need to realize that those limiting beliefs become core beliefs because someone else told them to us, not us. Our egos just like to keep those negative stories nice and strong to protect us. It's just a protective thing. It's not anything to be like upset about or mad about or even frustrated about, because it's our own body's way of protecting us, the same as my body did when I got told I had a brain tumor. So for me, that's the thing about the limiting beliefs, is that I just greet them with compassion. I thank them for keeping me safe all of this time and stuck where I'm at. But I get to get out of my own way now and write my own book. I get to write my own story. So that's kind of what I would have to say about that. I feel like Forrest Gump when I say that.
No, I love that. And there's just so much to unpack in what you just said, and everything that you just delivered here. I've taken copious notes as you've been talking, because there's just so many golden nuggets you've been dropping. And as we kind of come to the end of this episode, and I feel like there should be a continuation episode down the line. I feel like there should be a part 2, part 3, part 4.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes. That's how I ended up with my own radio show.
Shar's new book. Obviously, everybody encounters their own problems. Not all of them are medical, like in your situation. You know, yeah. Some are just metaphorical, but everybody encounters them to some degree, and it impacts them at varying degrees. So what would you say, you know, whether it's one big tip or 3 steps, how somebody can start kind of getting out of their own way and, you know, getting to the point where they can write their own book?
So number 1, I think, is acceptance. I think you just have to accept the reality of any given situation. You have to accept yourself. You have to accept where you're at. You have to accept the people around you and where they're at. You need a level of acceptance. And by acceptance, I don't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. I don't mean accepting and like surrendering to the fact that things are never going to change. Oh, this is how it is. It's never going to be any different. It isn't about that. It's about having a genuine acceptance of accepting reality exactly as it is in this moment and not trying to fight it, just getting all right with it. Just it's the reckoning, you know, like, okay, get straight. Acceptance is the key. Number 1, accept things exactly as they are. And then you need to get a level of awareness. For me, it's about self awareness. This is the number one thing. If I could teach anybody anything, it would be how to improve their self-awareness. And there's a million and one ways of doing that. It's a podcast all on its own. But self-awareness is so key because your body is constantly talking to you. It's constantly giving you signals. It's constantly letting you know that things are okay or not okay. And it's giving you the cues to allow yourself to make shifts and adjustments when required. The fact is, a lot of us aren't aware enough of ourselves and of our bodies and of the cues and the clues that it gives us. So it taps us on the shoulder going, hey, like, Shar, that's not okay. Like, you really shouldn't be doing that because we don't like it. Like, it's not good for you. And then, like, you don't listen. You keep steamrolling forward and you're trying to get where you want to go. And your body's like, dude, I'm trying to, like, you know, so you get the tap on the shoulder. Then you get like the slap on the arm. And then if you're still not listening, it's going to pick up a sledgehammer and it's going to whack you across the head and it's going to wipe you out and you're going to end up in the hospital with some kind of chronic illness. Like, that's just the way it works, you know? So I think there has to be a level of acceptance and the self-awareness. Please, if you take anything away, start listening to your body. Allow yourself to just get quiet every now and again and ask questions of yourself. If your body's telling you something, just get curious. Just get curious. Like, and it's accepting stuff without judgment. Without judgment. It's being aware without judgment. We're not here to like beat ourselves up. That's the problem with the limiting beliefs, is that we might have a level of awareness and acceptance, but we beat ourselves up about it. I shouldn't be thinking that way. I shouldn't be feeling like this. I shouldn't be in this position. I should be making more money. I should be married by now. I should have 5 kids. I shouldn't have any kids. I should, you know, whatever it is, you know, we just tell ourselves all this crap, right? So I think it's about acceptance and awareness. And then it's about inspired action from there. So I suppose those are my kind of like 3, we'll call them the 3 A's: acceptance, awareness, and action. But it's got to be inspired action. You know, I think you've got to like go with the flow a bit, but don't be afraid to just get out of your own way and take a step forward and just see what happens.
Well, and I think kind of going back to what you said, the advice from your friend, you know, you say it has to be inspired action, but in some cases it just has to be action.
Yeah.
Right? Because standing still and, you know, waiting for something to happen is the surefire way for nothing to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, but the thing is, like, so for me in that instance, it was more about education and career, right? So it's like, what do I want to, like, I don't know if people are asking themselves this, what do I want to be when I grow up? Like, I still ask myself that. What do I want to be when I grow up? You know, they say people have like 7 different careers in their lifetime now.
Right.
People change their careers like 7 times in a lifetime now. It's not like it used to be in the 30s, 40s, 50s when you went into a job and you stayed in that job and you were rewarded for your loyalty. Like, it just doesn't work like that anymore. Like, people change their jobs, they change their careers constantly. You're allowed to have a new lease on life. You're allowed to have like new ventures that you try. And I'm all about having multiple revenue streams and trying your hand at all kinds of stuff. Like, that's how I roll. I don't want to be pigeonholed into one thing necessarily. But with that example in particular, I knew it was around my education and my career, and the 2 were intertwined. And I needed to just pick something. And I knew that there were certain things that I was good at. And I knew that if I just took that step, it would get me somewhere to where I was going. But I was very deliberate about how I did it. So although I just did something, I was extremely deliberate. I was in the UK and I researched every course. There's a lot of degrees that are not transferable between the UK and America. And I did months of research to find the one that if I got qualified in the UK, I could move back to America and it would still be recognized.
Interesting.
So that's what I mean by inspired action. Yeah, sometimes you do just have to do something, but it has to be inspired. You've got to still do a bit of research. You still have to make sure that you're stepping in a direction that is going to be in alignment with who you are and potentially where you might think you want to go. that can change. That's the directions can change, but just step forward. And that's what I mean, I think, by inspired action, is that I didn't just leap into it. I kind of was brave enough to make the decision, but I still did a lot of research around it.
Well, Shar, thank you so much for being on here. Truly appreciated all of the not only the insight that you shared, but the 3 steps that you shared and the glimpse into your own journey and how you overcame all the challenges that you faced. So thank you so much for being here. And how can people reach out to you or get a hold of you or find you, whether it's your website? How can people find out more?
Okay, I've tried to keep it really simple across the platforms. You can find me, Instagram's probably where I'm the most active. You can find me at blonde.and.strong. So everything's going to be blonde and strong because that's me. You can find me on my website at www.blondeandstrong.com. I've also Blonde and Strong on Facebook. So yeah, reach out. I'm on Clubhouse, as you well know, because that's how we connected. On there at Shar Weil. So you can find me on there as well.
Awesome. So I'll have all that in the show notes as well. So thank you again. And this has been another episode of Your Life Unchained with Shar Weil this time. Thank you again, and make your day count.